Today's discussion, Caregiving in the Work of Gail Rebhan, brings together a panel of distinguished speakers who will reflect on the topic of intergenerational responsibility and care from their diverse disciplinary positions. Programs at UCR ARTS are supported by the College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences and by the City of Riverside. Before I pass it along to Sally to introduce today's guests, I'd like to first respectfully acknowledge our responsibility to the original and current caretakers of this land, water, and air, the Cahuilla, Gabrielino Tongva, Luceño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants, past, present, and future. Plays the home to many indigenous peoples from all over the world, including UCR faculty, students, and staff, and we are grateful for the opportunity to live and learn these times. This spring, our Thursday talks, organized by Lindsay Hamill, Director of Education, explore themes evoked by Gail Rebhan's work, from our first program on immigration and family life to today's discussion centering on caregiving, to next month's meeting for political activism. All three of these conversations will be posted online on the museum's YouTube channel. The exhibition Gail Rebhan, About Time, is a retrospective spanning the artist's career from her MFA work to the present. It is currently on view at the California Museum of Photography in Riverside through August 17th. The exhibition is curated by Sally Stein, Professor Emerita at UC Irvine. Since retiring from UCI, Professor Stein, now based back in New York, continues to research and write about modern and contemporary photography in relation to broader questions of culture and society. In addition to Gail Rebhan About Time, she has curated and co-curated exhibitions on Ken O'Hara, John Goodman, Rondell Partridge, and her late husband, Alan Sekula. Gail's retrospective is accompanied by an extensive monograph published by MACK. It features Sally's thoughtful writing, as well as gorgeous reproductions of Gail's work. I highly recommend it. Sally has recently published several other books with MACK, including the deceptively slim but utterly perspective-altering monograph on Dorothea Lange's canonic photograph, Migrant Mother. And just out this month, congratulations, Close-Ups from Afar, select short and longer essays on social uses of photography is a compilation that brings together her essential writings from over 5 decades, cumulatively demonstrating her distinctive critical approach to the history of photography and its role within mass media and contemporary culture. All of these are available directly from the publisher's website. With that, Sally, I invite you to unmute yourself and take it away.
Thank you, Joanna. It's my pleasure to introduce the panelists today. Dr. Kimberly Hiroto is a clinical geropsychologist and affiliated associate professor at Stanford University School of Medicine. She specializes in palliative and hospice care and has contributed to updating the American Psychological Association's guidelines for psychological practice with older adults. She has served on their boards and committees dedicated to aging and social justice, and most recently helped update their resolution on palliative and end-of-life care. Dr. Jenny Zorkin is professor and chair of History of Art and Architecture at University of California, Santa Barbara, and is affiliated in the Art, Feminist Studies, History, and Media Arts and Technology departments. That's a lot of departments. She writes on the intersections between gender, material culture, and contemporary art, working primarily on women artists and underrepresented media. Her books include Live Form, Women's Ceramics Community, 2016, Revolution in the Making, Abstract Sculpture by Women Artists, 1947 to 2016, and Art in California, 2021, as well as numerous essays in journals and exhibition catalogs. She serves on the University of California Press editorial board as the co-executive and also as the co-executive editor of Panorama, the Association of Historians of American Art, and is a member of the editorial board of the Journal of Modern Craft. She received her PhD in the history of art from Yale University is the recipient of fellowships from the American Council of Learned Societies, the Center for Craft, the Getty Research Institute, and the Smithsonian American Art Museum. Dr. Rachel Wu here at UC Riverside is a developmental cognitive neuroscientist investigating how we can best learn and attend across the lifespan. Sorry. She has shown that with a supportive learning environment, older adults' cognitive abilities can be enhanced to levels similar to younger adults. She was in a rock band as a violinist. I want to hear this. And also as a professional painter. Every few years, she learns to master new skills to gain a better understanding of the difficulties in being an adult learner. Next, please. Okay, now I'm going to introduce photo and media artist Gail Rebhan, accompanied by a few overviews of the exhibition at CMP, starting with this great exterior shot with an enlargement of what questions do we ask. Next again. Gail Rebhan is a Washington, D.C. based photographer and professor emerita of photography at Northern Virginia Community College. She has an MFA from California Institute of the Arts and an undergraduate degree from Antioch College. Rebhan has had works in hundreds of exhibitions, including at the Lentos Kunstmuseum, Linz, Austria, Museum Folkwang, Essen, Germany, and Blue Sky Gallery, Portland, Oregon. Her first museum retrospective, Gail Rebhan, About Time at the American University Museum Katzen Art Center in Washington, D.C., was accompanied by the publication by MACK, books likewise titled Gail Rebhan, About Time. Next, please. An expanded, redesigned, fabulously redesigned version of the exhibition with the new series, What Questions Do We Ask?, has traveled to the CMP at the University of California, Riverside, where it's on view until August 17. Sorry. Next again. Integral to Rebhan's various bodies of work is an interest in time and change, and the usually overlooked or considered unspeakable, unmentionable. Her works, which often configure photographs and text in series, examine gender, aging, race, ethnicity, and the built environment. The child of immigrants, Rebhan documents the experience of several Jews, starting with their parents under Hitler's reign in Europe and their immigrant stories. Next, please. She also creates photo collages examining the cultural history of specific sites in her hometown of Washington, D.C., or the town where she's lived longest, and surrounding communities. In recent years, Rebhan, as you can see on the left here, has photographed for and coordinates exhibitions with the Bethesda African Cemetery Coalition, Bethesda being in Maryland, but very close to the DC border. Another recent self-portrait series examines the taboo subject of female aging, which Rebhan insists on calling more vitally living. Next, please. We'll return to that living series, but here's an opening wall with just one vertical from that late series, beside considerably earlier portraits, starting with her first self-portrait. Next again, please. It may not seem to have much to do with women artists juggling caregiving, but I think it anticipates that sense of intergenerational connectedness. Gail, would you tell us a little about this photo you made while in college, which is on the upper left of the tiny view below?
I made this for an assignment in one of my first photography classes as an undergraduate, where we were supposed to do a self-portrait, and I ripped a page from Ms. Magazine that was of a photorealist painting, and I was really already thinking about, I guess, aging and what would happen, and so I juxtaposed my teenage self with that image, and it's got this underlining, so it's a little ominous as well.
To me, it's so surprising because I'm a little older than you. So a couple of years earlier in the late 60s, when I was an undergraduate, I can't imagine ever making a self-portrait or allowing anyone to make a portrait of my 18, 19, or 20-year-old self with a picture of older women in it. I just didn't want to think about the future. And it was a time when there was an expression, anyone over 30 should be dead anyway. Well, I mean, it was a horrible expression in my opinion, but
Yeah.
But it's so impressive to me that you decided in making a self-portrait to include this picture of one very much older woman and presumably her daughters behind her. And it's a photograph from Ms. Magazine, which had just started appearing that year, um, but of a painting. Next, please. We're going to go move quickly. But I wanted to actually start with some of the early videos you made also while still an undergraduate in college. Can we see the next, please? Excerpt from Sexism in Saturday Morning Television Advertisements from 1971.
Perfect! Roger, skyscraper, you're too high. Roger. You're on course. Bear right. Follow the crosshairs. Roger, skyscraper.
How many little toes does baby have here? I have 5 little toes. I love you, Smarty Pants. I love you, Mommy.
You contrast what boys are being sold on, which is action games, with what girls are being sold on, young girls, very young girls, in terms of dolls that they can baby and sort of take care of.
Right. And the audio is actually very important. I made this, I think, my first semester in college for a sociology class with Marge Nelson, and it was my first experience of using media. And the audio for the boys is these deep male voiceovers, and it's all very action packed and real quick. And the girls, there are male and female voices, and it's much slower and a smoother, softer kind of music, and it's all about being a mother with babies and shopping and beauty pageants.
Thank you. We're going to go on to the next, please. This is work done sort of shortly. I mean, when you were starting your graduate studies a couple of years later, at the beginning, before you had children, but after when you have a young child as well, when you're already married. So, and here you're using really very snapshot sized, but actually better than most snapshots, but to give this sort of sequence from everyday life, not exciting moments, but here, next, please. We're going to give one example. Mark watches the Olympics with his son, Andy, and mother, Lil. Can you say something? I mean, it's a little small to see. You have to get up close. I hope people in the museum do get up very close.
So it's about this divided attention on the father's part. He keeps going back to looking at the television, which is showing the Olympics and boxing, a very sort of masculine kind of sport. And the grandmother has totally undivided attention on the baby. So it's about these gender roles. And in the very last one, you can see that Mark actually puts a transistor radio to his ear, presumably listening to some other sports event. And there's humor in this work as well.
A lot of humor, but it also relates to the sexism in children's advertisements on Saturday morning in terms of how much these roles are encoded in real life as well. And one should say Mark is her husband and Lil is the mother-in-law. So she's actually, instead of screaming, no, you can't do this, she's just deciding, I'm going to photograph this. I'm going to capture what's really going on inside the household. Next, please. This is not her husband, but her cousin, I believe. Yes.
My cousin's husband.
Your cousin's husband, sorry, holds his 3-week-old son, David, 1983. We're going to get to a very big, I mean, here the child looks tiny, is tiny. This is a very young infant. We'll get to another picture fairly soon, which is of a very large Polaroid, a 24 by 20 Polaroid, where the child looks humongous. I thought that Rachel wanted to comment on this. I'm not sure. Rachel? Did one of you say something about, actually, that's the year that I was born?
Oh yeah. I was born in '84, but it's I have like a lot of photos like this, similar photos in the family album that my um my parents keep.
Does it look like someone's throttling you in any of the pictures? Because I
Uh,
actually think these are in some ways more hardcore documents than most of the sweet family pictures.
right. This is so they handle boys, I think, differently than girls. At least that's what I was told. And so girls were, and also I was a preemie, so I was like even more delicate, and so yeah, it was they're much more, yeah, me laying there or like not as much handling, I think. Um, but
I,
yeah,
I mean,
resonated.
one reason I took this is it just seems such an awkward way of holding a baby. Usually you cradle them, but there is the support for the head, which you need to do at that age. But it just seems incredibly awkward.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty viral YouTube video on how to calm a crying baby, and it's to hold them by the neck and by the bottom,
Huh.
and to just kind of shake the bum, and uh, and it works. I tried it on all three of our kids.
Okay, we're going to go on. This is a related series she was doing at the same time called Domestic Still Lives. And I have to say, the next one, please, which is on the right here. The first time Gail showed this to me 4 decades ago, I went, oh my God, because I had just met her. She was in a workshop that I was teaching in Rochester. But suddenly began thinking, and I don't have children, but I was thinking, yes, I do all the laundry and the folding and hanging up, and my partner constantly just leaves stuff in disarray, and then I'm trying to straighten, but as soon as you straighten the next day, it's a mess again. It's sort of women's work is never this kind of stupid women's work, but women's work often traditionally is never done here. And it's actually, and I've studied all of these, but some of them have taken much longer for me to sort of respond to really personally. Can we go to the next one? It's only recently when I looked at this, I went, oh, in a small apartment. I mean, a lot of us feminist, art-minded people grew up with Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, but this is a great example of there's no room of one's own. The eating table, the breakfast and evening dinner table is also the place where she's laying out pictures, uh, but also trying to keep everything very neat because if you look at her work, both the presentation of the grid, but she's very interested in order, but family and other humans often challenge this, as we'll see. Can we go to next? And next again, because now we're moving to this. Do you want to say something, Gail, about this big giant Polaroid?
What I wanted to do in this work is mimic what it's like to have a young baby, the way a mother will look at a young baby, because they seem enormous, even though they're really little. They just loom so gigantic in your mind. And also with the Polaroid, it's very detailed and crisp because it's a contact print. There's no grain. And I think that parents often really inspect the way the kid looks and the skin, and there's also this repulsion attraction because they have beautiful soft skin, but here the baby's sweating and crying, and there's mucus, and they're all like need help. So I was very much trying to do something that was different than cute baby pictures, and try to show the reality in someone's mind, even though obviously they're not real huge.
Of course, Gail's not the only person who did work as an artist and a mother on these topics. And Jenny sort of brought up in conversation with me, Mary Kelly. Can we see the next one? Oh, excuse me. Don't take a picture of me. First, we're going to see this. Sorry.
Don't take a picture of me. Look, there, there. Dot. Oh, Beardy.
what I was trying to do in this work is several different things, but part of it is the conflict of being an artist and being a mother and wondering if I'm screwing up my kids by using them in my artwork or not. But also the tradition of documentary photography where it's as if the photographer's not there, but I'm obviously am there. They interact with me in these short vignettes, these family tapes, and the actual one goes on for 5 or 6 minutes, and it's kind of painful because he keeps saying that I shouldn't take a picture of him. And finally, I stop when he tells me to stop. But then in the next video, he actually wants me to take his picture and keeps asking if I am including him in the frame. So it's about photography and videotaping as well as about the conflict of being a mother and trying to multitask.
It was interesting because our daughter recently did that too, and I was teaching her consent because she was also taking pictures of me. I didn't want her to take pictures of, but I was like, "But and it was picture day today, so I really wanted to take a picture of her." She's like, "No, I don't want to." And I was like, "No, the one day when you're dressed up." It's really interesting. Kids do that.
To assert themselves. And it's a game of power. But it's interesting to show the child resisting or challenging this process.
Just as a point of comparison, it's interesting to think about Mary Kelly's work, who is also a feminist working about a decade earlier than Gail, because she's a kind of predecessor feminist, who put together a document called Postpartum Document that is really a conceptual art project and a psychoanalytic exploration of the mother-child relationship, its transformations, the idea of the analytic observer. And it's a document that sort of rejects any kind of cliched adorableness of babies, and it rejects any kind of idea that the mother is contented. And so for me, its agency becomes a very interesting parallel in Gail's work in relation to her son distinctly rejecting the photographic or video documentation and understanding that he's being taped, turning away from the camera, whereas Mary Kelly's son was a newborn and she's, documenting his fecal stains. And I had the good fortune at one point to meet her son, Kelly, and I said, "What do you think of that postpartum document?" And he said, "Well, frankly, it's a little embarrassing. I don't like to stand in the same room with it."
That's interesting.
Thank you. I think we're going to go on. Yes. I've always enjoyed this one. Again, there's a lot of humor. Gail, do you want to say something about this sequence? What you were trying to get at?
Well, I thought it was interesting. The younger cousins are horsing around and just playing and wrestling with each other, even though the TV is on. But suddenly they stop when what comes on the TV is a picture of a woman in a bikini, and now they're suddenly focused on the TV. So it's just really interesting how at very young ages kids are influenced by media and what
In the book
affects
that you
them.
did, sorry. In the book you did, Mother-Son Talk, can we go next? You see it as a tiny little pink dot in the lower right. But here's a page from the book. You're dealing with all sorts of both school influences of what they bring home, which is sometimes a lot of garbage, and also media influences from TV to, in this case, do you want to read the text here?
So I'm often like this foil in the work. I was proud of my 9-year-old son when I saw him studying with intense concentration the book Great French Paintings from the Barnes Collection. I noticed that he was writing on an index card while looking at the paintings. After he left, I looked at the card. My son wrote down the page number of every nude in the book. Which, of course, I was thinking he was just appreciating art.
And of course, feminists in this period are trying to figure out, is there a divide between aesthetics and pornography and erotica, or is this a continuous spectrum? So it's interesting here in terms of how he's picking it up and treating it all as sort of gentle porn.
Right.
We're going to move on. Next, please. The text is pretty long here, so I wondered if you could just read the beginning and the end of the paragraph. This also is from the mother-son talk. But here you turn the camera back on yourself, or you look at pictures and enlarge details of your face in two different pictures.
So this is the last page of the book also. I had lunch with another professor and some students. The students asked us about our respective children. My colleague said he couldn't imagine what life was like before he had kids. And then the next few sentences examine what does he mean by that. And then it ends with saying, I certainly can imagine what life without kids would be like. I think about it frequently, and I certainly remember my life before children. And you see sort of these idyllic pictures of my life before children, and then very stressed out with the two kids, but cuddling them as well. So there's
Yes.
ambivalence in a lot of the work.
Enrichment, and it's taking its toll on your face,
Right.
which you continue to think about in various other works. We'll continue now. I mentioned already her interest in order, and we've seen already one video in which her son is saying, don't take my picture, and resisting. And can we go to the next slide, please? Here's Squirt Gun, which I actually get dizzy looking at, because can you explain this about your child who's home for the summer from college?
I photographed his room when he was working, so he didn't know I was doing this while I was photographing it. But I do want to get consent from the people in my photographs. I mean, it's one reason I don't do street photography or photograph strangers, is that people can always get in contact with me and let me know what they think. So at the end of the summer, I asked him if I told him I did some work about him, and he turned totally white. And then I showed it to him, and he burst out laughing. And it's about being a sort of an adult and sort of a kid, because all the different junk that's in his room, a squirt gun, and then there's pizza boxes. And I think it portrays me as a bad mother to let this pizza box be there for so long and moving around, and his different interests. There's other ones that show beer in there. And
Playboy?
it's a boy.
Playboy, yeah. But in a sense, you're still replicating the grid of earlier picture sets. But here it's really about how you can't control the order, or you've chosen only to intervene as an observer with a camera, albeit also as the mother of this occupant of your house, but without trying to straighten up.
Yeah, I didn't adjust. I didn't move anything. And it's male clutter. It seems very male to me.
We're going to move on now. The grid continues here with most important. Do you want to read this, Gail?
Okay, so it says, I heard a man on the radio say glibly that his child is the most important thing in his life. Whenever I hear a man make such a statement, I wonder, who takes care of his child? Does he make certain that his child arrives at school and returns home safely? Does he check the homework? Does he take the child to the doctor? Does he take time off work when his child is sick? Does he attend the school plays, field trips, and teacher conferences? Does he make certain that his child gets to various after-school activities? Is his child really his number one priority on a daily basis? For a woman, being a parent is a juggling act. For a man, it's more theoretical. And in the background, you see my date book, which is filled with I was a faculty member, with faculty meetings, with kids' activities, doctor's appointments, and so you really get a sense of how stressful it is and busy.
I guess, yes. For me, this is the grid of caring, how it sort of locks you in and it overextends you, but and it's layered in this way that our lives tend to be very layered as well. Next, please. And here I'm counting on both Kimberly and Rachel to talk about the sandwich generation, and particularly taking care of parents. This is actually from medical appointments in the, excuse me, this from the I'm sorry, this is medical appointments, and the series is called, sorry, Gail, I'm forgetting.
Aging. The entire series is called Aging, but this piece is called Medical Appointments.
And you see on the right, I mean, you see a child on the left and on the right is at the end of his life, actually at the time of his death, when you have photographed both a bedside table with a lot of different medicines and caregiving items on it, and above a picture of this man meeting the Pope with his wife and also meeting Golda Meir. So he's obviously led in some ways a very distinguished life, but he's reduced to decline like many of us will be. I'm curious about both Kimberly and Rachel and your thoughts about these.
Sure, I'm glad to start. Just as a disclaimer, I'm definitely not an artist or know much about art history, but as a geropsychologist and someone working in hospice and palliative care, I think it really captures how much a person's, especially for older adults with multiple medical problems, how much their life and their daily life and their schedules are really dictated by medical appointments. At times, I think often a lot of people that I work with will say that their time really isn't their own anymore. It's really working around different medical appointments, and then the challenges of adjusting to medical frailty, to the disruption of hospitalization, perhaps the shock or not of a terminal diagnosis, and then the real existential distress and challenge of acquired disability, of adjusting to loss, reduced functioning, and then often questioning why this is happening, whether it's why is this happening to me, or why haven't I died yet? That in between liminal space between living and dying, and that experience of existing. And I really appreciate the overlay of the calendar, because it is a grid, but it also looks almost like an imprisonment in some ways. And I think what's not spoken here, but what I appreciate is also that it's all the caregiving that goes into taking the person to the medical appointments, the stress of managing and juggling all these appointments amid other life stressors, and that sandwich generation of taking care of young ones and older adults. I think it's really powerful. It's a powerful collection.
Just for clarification, the red squares are all the doctor's appointments. And in the white lettering that you can't see here is what type of doctor he's going to. And then the blue indicates when he went into an assisted living. And so you see the number of appointments really reduced at that point.
With also doctors at some point declaring there's not much more we can do. So then it falls back on usually family members, if one is so lucky to have family members around who are attending to this person who's no longer, and the healthcare staff, when the doctors have said there's nothing really more to do except to sort of observe this decline and try to help treat it.
I also wanted the pictures in the background are from each year, and the fact that it's not linear, because in 2004 he looks a lot worse than he does in 2005, and that's also typical for things to go up and down.
Thank you. Next, please. Jenny had an interesting comparison with thinking about Linda Montano, Dad Art, a performance that extended from 2018 to 2008 to 2018. Jenny, do you want to talk about this?
Linda Montano is a performance artist who lives in upstate New York now, spent some time in San Francisco, but when she moved back to her hometown, was tasked with taking care of her aging and ailing father who died of Alzheimer's eventually. And she, in order to sort of alleviate the difficulty, I think, of caregiving, started making what she called dad art. And so she started documenting him, and their in her capacity as a caregiver, and making art alongside him. So creating a space where he had a certain amount of agency to participate, as you know, as long as he was willing. And then she would blow up, big videos of him later on in performances and do things collaboratively with other artists. But it was a way of trying to sort of stay in contact with her own role as an artist, but then incorporate, everyday life into her art, as Gail is also doing. So I think it's really interesting to see these kinds of feminist strategies in approaching the role of caregiving, in dealing with aging, and it's something that women artists have always done, and this was sort of a key characteristic of the feminist movement starting in the 70s, which was to explore taboo subject matter that acknowledged the complexities of women's lives, such as domesticity, abuse, menstruation, child rearing, childbirth, and then adding the aging body and caregiving into that space as well, in which the body still is maintained as a site of inquiry, as a site of exploration. And this work collectively is often characterized by biting social critique and a lot of wit and humor, because that's sort of the best way to deal with it.
Thanks. We're going to go on to next, please, to Kant. So this is the wall of Kant. And then the next one is a detail of the third to last. Do you want to say something? You want to read the text, Gail?
So these aren't at regular intervals, but they were at, I created them at times when all of a sudden there were a lot more things he couldn't do. And again, it is stuff people don't talk about, and it was also a way of me dealing with it by creating the artwork. And I think it's so intense because I was creating the artwork while I was going through this. So it's my 83-year-old father can't put in his dentures, sleep through the night without assistance, get up from a seated position, stand with a walker, consistently feed himself, push out a bowel movement. To accommodate his decreasing abilities, he must have a caregiver next to him throughout the night. He must be strapped into a chair so he will not get up and fall. He entered a nursing home on June 29th. And I show all the paraphernalia that goes with that.
Which hardly ever figures in these depictions of aging and decline. It's like too gross.
Nobody wants to think about it. Yeah.
Actually, the publisher of the catalog said, "You're not going to put this in, are you?" I mean, he was freaked out by the idea of, we're not going to look at male Depends and Pampers. This should be considered obscene, as in off-scene and off-screen, as opposed to confronted. But obviously, caregivers have to confront this.
And I think the image that they have on the Depends is so interesting, where it's sort of, you can't figure out what gender it is, and it certainly doesn't look like somebody old. So they're trying to make it as appealing as possible. I don't know.
I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on this. I should say that in this series, the image on the right, and we're not showing it here, is at the time of his death and his obituary in the Washington Post, where he's proclaimed as an international labor leader. So, which corresponds to the picture also of him meeting with the Pope and meeting with Golda Meir as well. But he really wasn't, he had risen as an immigrant without ever finishing high school through the ranks of the UAW as a labor organizer, and went on to then be the head of the International Metal Workers Union based in Geneva. So he really was an international labor leader of significant influence, progressive influence. So, and yet ultimately he's reduced to this as well. So Gail is trying to contrast these two ways in which we elevate men of influence, and then now look at them in terms of, and this is what it comes to ultimately. Next, please.
I think Jenny wanted to say something.
Sorry.
That's
Excuse
okay. I just wanted to sort of comment on this idea of uh, the fact that it's very rare to see men put in this kind of situation of frailty publicly. And this is these are brave images that Gail has made and put forward in terms of being able to depict the two sides of her father's life in terms of this, the kind of long arc of publicness and then the private, which is also again, a kind of feminist strategy of putting forward these private moments that are often considered shameful to have to be in depends or to need all this assistance because it shows some sort of weakness. But in fact, this weakness is just a common factor of aging and living over the age of 80, and what it means, and also just how I don't know. I think it's a really interesting contrast, and I think, Sally, the fact that your publisher had an issue with it is very much proof that it's taboo.
Thanks. Okay, we're going to shift now to back to self-representation, which we saw at the beginning. I wonder if you could read the text on the left. There's both a big freeze of these fairly large images that Gail made during COVID, self-portraits of parts of her body, along with the text of the common slurs against women of a certain age. But earlier already, in gray hair, can you read that, Gail?
I'm starting to get gray hair. Why does this bother me? Because it makes me look older. What's wrong with looking older? If I dye my hair, I will be giving into what our culture dictates about female beauty, yet I don't like the way I look with gray streaks. I start looking at other women's hair color. I decide that a high percentage of women dye their hair. Why don't I like my gray hair? After much agonizing, I decide to dye my hair. No one notices. So all these words going back and forth in my mind, and like everyone, I'm influenced by what our society thinks is beautiful.
I also love the sort of final closer, no one notices, because we go through all this mishigas, this turmoil about should I or shouldn't I, and then nobody notices, in
Right.
part because women of a certain age, even younger than seniors, stop being noticed very carefully. And then during COVID, as you decided, I'm going to stop coloring my hair, 27 years later, you make this self-portrait as part of this series in which it's a record of time between while coloring my hair and then while stopping and letting it grow out.
Right. It's a transition. It's a change, and it's an accepting view of aging. And I call it living. I call my dad's series aging and mine living because I do want to put a somewhat positive spin on this, because that's what happens if you live. So it's good to live.
We should be so fortunate.
Right, right.
Or those of us. Though I have to say, during COVID, actually during the era of the previous president, I began to think maybe the only democracy is getting old and dying. Okay, that's a dark view, sorry. We'll continue now. The last two pictures in this newest series that is only on view for the first time in Riverside. It wasn't part of the original because you had not yet made it. What questions do we ask? There are 8. And you have one which is about babies, how the census has changed its questions about babies over many, many decades. And then in the next, again, getting back to the issue of needing prosthetic devices of one sort or another, what questions do we ask about disability? I'm going to wrap this up kind of because, and turn it back over to Joanna Szubinska because we want to leave time for questions.
Thank you, Gail, Sally, and all of our panelists. Please do join us in person for the final discussion in this series, Unearthing Black Histories, at the Culver Center of the Arts in Riverside on Sunday, June 8th. It'll also be a great opportunity to view the exhibition in person, and we'd love to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.